sign's fancy.
Damn. All right, here we go. Episode number 1 of the Without Equal podcast. So I'm your host, Rob McQueen, one of the principals and founders of Sine Pari. I'm joined by my 2 other partners and founders of Sine Pari, Steve Cargill and Chris Perry. So we'll start off just by going around the horn. I guess I'll start off since I'm doing this damn thing. Rob McQueen, 17 years in the U.S. military, majority of that in special operations, infantry guy, and then civil affairs, and just opportunities to do some fun stuff around the world. And then following that, I went over to the nonprofit space, was the military project director, and then eventually the field operations director on the executive team of Waves for Water. And then I started and ran the veteran division of Waves for Water called the Clean Water Corps, where we just got to go do a bunch of fun shit all over the world. There we go already, Chris, and Steve. We talked about this earlier. I'm swearing already. So this is a podcast. We will do our best to not swear, but it's going to happen because we're all from the military, and it's been painful for me not to say fuck up to this point.
It's part of the lexicon.
It's just what it is. Like, we're going to move forward. So that's my entire story getting into this. A lot of experience. I've run a few startups, and this is my second startup, real startup venture. Chris and I started another nonprofit at one point. We'll see where that goes. But it's been a great time, and excited to kind of move forward to this. So Steve, since you were the driving force on getting Sine Pari moving forward, why don't you jump in and introduce yourself, and then we'll pass it off to Chris.
Yeah, man. Hey, Steve Cargill here. 18 years in the Army, and last 12 years in special operations as a special forces officer. Last operation was in charge of all special operations in Central America. Fortuitously, that's where I got to meet Chris Perry. Rob was able to come down with one of his nonprofits and come do an operation with us, and brought Chris along with him. So I got to meet Chris, and that was awesome. And, obviously we're all together here now. So really excited about, this endeavor here. I guess you could say it's my brainchild, but had a bad day at work one day, and it was really the catalyst for what this has evolved to become. And really lucky to have the cast that we have here: Rob, Chris, and then all of our cadre. They're consummate professionals that I feel lucky to be surrounded by. So with that, pass it off to Chris.
Yep, Chris Perry. Retired now, but started out infantry, went to special forces just before 9/11 a little bit. So 23 years total in the military, 21 of that in special forces as 18 Echo and then 18 Zulu. I was pretty fortunate. First group my entire time, had a pretty robust list of deployments to all the fun spots. And then towards the end of my career is where I met Rob McQueen. And he brought me on to some nonprofit work, which was a great time, learned a lot, and was actually able to give back quite a bit, which really facilitated the veteran transition process. Like I said, it was towards the end of my career, which I've been very fortunate with my transition out of the military. We started doing projects all around the world, really, with a phenomenal organization. And that's where I met Steve, Honduras, I believe it was, and continued on to do a bunch of different projects concurrently, and then through the 3 of us coming together. Again, this was Steve's brainchild, and then the 3 of us have been able to put the project together in addition to, and we couldn't have done it without some amazing cadre, and then the people who volunteered to be our initial alumni class that went through. So we've learned so much from it, and we're really looking forward to getting on and improving and learning going forward from what we've learned so far. Really excited, and it's really inspirational project. Personally for me, the veteran nonprofit piece that Rob and I were working on was a great kind of give back feel to it, and this is just taking it to the next level. What we're doing here, really giving back to the force also.
Dude, this really did start in Hondo, didn't it? Like, this is kind of where this whole group team that we have going on kicked off. And you gotta go back to Honduras, I think, Steve. I think we could talk a little bit about that trip, and Chris, because that was a blast. Like that was a the craziest landing I've ever been on in a civilian aircraft.
Well, everybody claps at the end when they get on the ground in Honduras, because there's a cliff at the end of the runway.
Well, there's a cliff, but flying in, they're literally on wing on like a 90-degree turn. And when they level up, you're below ground. It's like cut into the hillside.
Yeah.
It is the shadiest landing I have ever done outside of a military aircraft.
Ever.
I remember specifically flying in because I had a window seat, I believe, and I looked out the left window and I thought, oh, there must be two airfields here, because we were at, I think, 1,500 feet or so, and I could clearly see the airfield out to the left of the airplane. And then it was a 90-degree bank, and we slammed on the ground, and he slammed on the brakes.
Yep.
And welcome to Tegu. Yeah. It was,
well, yeah. Also, too, you guys happened to get there on a good day, because I was there that same year, 2019, and on May 30th or 31st, forget which, it's the airport there is prone to being taken over by protesters, and it was seized by protesters that day while I was there about to fly over to Panama. So yeah, I mean, you got that going on too.
Well, I mean, because we rolled in, and so we had Greg, which just a shout out to our boy Greg. Just one of the most talented videographers and raddest dudes I've ever met in my life, Greg McKillop. But so Chris was on one side of the plane looking down, and Greg is on the other side of me looking up. And at least Chris and I have had the experience of some shady military flights,
hard landings and whatnot.
Like hard landings. But we're in a United, 777. Like this is not a small aircraft. And Greg is looking up at the sky and looking down. And he's like grabbing onto the seats. I was like, it's going to be okay. And in my mind, I'm like, there's a solid chance we might die, but Greg doesn't need to know that right now.
And didn't know it at the time, but if I remember correctly, Steve, you'd know, was Tegucigalpa, the airfield there, it drops off at the end of the runway, doesn't it? Like it's fairly short.
Yeah, there is a cliff. And if you would have gone over the cliff, you wouldn't have been the first.
Well, and then so we make it through, we go through customs because we've got John Rose with us, who's, stellar founder of Waves for Water. And then we have R2, who's probably the greatest photographer I've ever worked with, Nepomuceno. There's no way I totally butchered his name, R2. I apologize, from the Philippines. So we had, 4 Americans and a Filipino photographer coming into Tegucigalpa. We get outside of the airport, and then it's like, hey, we need to go hide out in the team house because there's a national level protest going on. And we can't leave. So we sat on the balcony and watched a massive march and a few some smoke bombs go off. And I was like, well, welcome to Honduras.
I think it's one of those things that coming from a military background, you understand or respect a little bit more, but it's stuff you don't see in the States as much. I remember the first day we were going out to do operations, was literally the protesters had the entire, all lanes of traffic blocked leading out of town. And we just had to turn around and
there were like guilds of people that were doing protests on various days, same days, etc. There were days when like the National Guild of the Nursing Guild, all the nurses were protesting. You were there on a day when all the truck drivers were like, hey, we're going to clog up the major arteries and make change because no one's getting anywhere, and it was like that all summer.
That's crazy. That was crazy. And I just remember going out to him because we went all the way out to the Nicaragua border, did some good water projects out there in those small towns. That was an experience, man. It was good. And it was super fun. I mean, Steve and I met back in 2009. I think we met in 2009 at the Captain's Career Course. And it was just super fun to kind of come together later on in life and work this whole thing out. Yeah, I mean, it's been a journey. I mean, Chris and I, our first project we did together was riding moto across the Gobi Desert with BMW for the GS Trophy in 2019 or 2018? 2018.
Got the T-shirt. Yeah,
got the T-shirt. And that was, I mean, that's I don't know, that's an experience of a lifetime. That's just one of those things where like just unreal experience. I don't think. Unreal experience. I don't know how to like go back from that. But just the things that we've gotten to do, and as Chris said, been able to give back. I think we've worked almost 12 natural disasters together, Chris, I think over the past 4 years. And so being able to cycle this back and shift to kind of take our expertise and experience, expertise is a loose term in this one. So, we can pare that down, but our experience and really tie it into giving back in a different way and starting to shape the next generation. So kind of what you can expect from the podcast as we go forward is you're going to get some conversations from 3 of us. You're going to get some of our alumni. You're going to get our insane group of cadre who are just overly qualified to work with us. And then what we're going to get to do is we get to bring in some of our network, and just through our life experience, we've been able to brush elbows with some really talented and really incredible people who've had some great experiences in leadership, both positive and negative. And they're going to come on and they're going to share that with us. So from former congresswomen to senior special operations leaders to executives in business to nonprofit founders, we get to work through the entire gamut of leadership across the spectrum, which is going to be a lot of fun. But today you're stuck with just us. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of dig into how this thing came to be, what we really see it doing, why the hell we're doing it. And then hopefully set the stage for you guys to kind of hit the subscribe button and listen to us a little bit more. Cause I swear to God, we're not that boring. Like we've done some fun shit in our days, and you'll get some stories out of us. Cause all of us are drinking. I'm on an IPA today because someone gave that to me at a party and that they came over for. And so apparently I'm living my semi-millennial roots right now with an IPA. Chris, what are you drinking? I saw some bourbon, I think.
Yeah, bourbon.
Like a true Texan. There we go. And Steve, I saw you had your German mug up. What do you got in there? A Heffy?
Weizen.
That's a Weizen. There it is. So there's our linguistic genius jumping back and forth. But yeah, so I think the next way to jump off is, hey, Steve, go back to what we talked about earlier. Go back to your terrible day, and then kind of go through your thought process. And I don't think I've even asked you on this part, because I just got a phone call out of the blue from you about this thing. So go through your thought process, and then kind of take it up to where you got to me.
Yeah, my no good, terrible day. So, you work in government, you think that you're surrounded by professionals, and one of my things that I try to do is I give people 100% of my trust from the beginning, because you have to trust in the infrastructure, in the system that, these people have gone through some sort of education, some schooling, some training. And there's been previous bosses that have blessed off on these people to get to where they are in their existence, to say, hey, they deserve to be there because they're capable and they're competent. But sometimes, I don't know, maybe people slip through the cracks, or maybe it's just their bad day. I had a day at work where the boss, who had the deputy of the element, who more or less took over by force because the actual dude in charge was rather sheepish, decided that he wanted to change the infrastructure of the organization without ever having really consulted anybody, without really having an understanding yet, after a month's time there in the office, of the dynamics and so on. And my group, we were having a weekly meeting, and he came in and he was just sat down and let us finish our sentence more or less, and then he said, hey, coming to you with some changes from today. Well, no, he said, we're going to disperse all of you amongst the rest of the organization, and we're going to restructure. So on the spot, he dissolved my group, which had been a high-performing team, which had been the driving force of our operations. And it was just came as a total shock. And I was like, so, hey, Chief, when does this take effect? He was like, right now. I was in total shock. I couldn't believe it. This guy, I was having impact. I was enjoying the impact that I was able to achieve with the high-performing team that I was with. I enjoyed that group dynamic. We were, hopping and popping, so to speak. And this guy brought it to a screeching halt. And after that, I don't think that I was able to achieve the same sort of impact, because I was going into a new element that, had their own set processes. I was able to continue to work and do good things, but it wasn't at the same level. It wasn't the same experience. And it was just completely disheartening, because there was no dialogue. There was no research done. There was no polling. There was no he just came up with this out of the blue and implemented it in a vacuum. And, there was no engagement in order to try to get everybody's buy-in in order to make to reorganize a high-performing team. No, he reorganized chaos, more or less, and it stymied the momentum that we had. And so this really pissed me off. And I dwelled on it for, I don't know, it had to be 2 weeks. First, you go through all the stages of grief, and I was pissed off, and then I was just like, well, I guess this is how it's going to be. But I couldn't accept that. I was like, I need to do something, because, and then just an aside, one of the greatest regrets of my career has been that I've never really had a mentor. And granted, part of that's probably on me. But I've grown up with, learning to become a leader by saying, don't be like that guy. Don't do what he did. That's jacked up. I'm not going to do that. And that's how I've been able to navigate my career and to be able to provide, guidance to those who I've been in charge of and had to interact with. That's how I've learned. And so this is the last straw of just ridiculousness of seeing leaders not performing up to their potential. And it set me off. And so I dwelled on it. I couldn't sleep. I was like, I have to do something. What can I do? Well, within that context, that infrastructure, I really didn't have much of an option. So I was like, well, I need to take this negative energy and channel it somehow. What can I do? I started thinking about, how can, the problem is, all right, leadership, it's at a deficit. It's missing here. All right. I've also experienced that it's, missing in other places, when people are focused on a highly, highly complex skill, they're really good at that, but they're not really paying attention to the people around them. And so their engagement's kind of off. And so, but, eventually, because they've done really well with that skill, maybe they'll get pinged, to be a leader 5-10 years down the road. And those are the people that either sink or swim and have never been groomed and grown into a leader. And so I see that as a problem. And I was like, well, maybe I can have an effect on that. Where is it most important to, when do people start learning about leadership? When should they? Maybe in high school, when, you start doing organized sports, team sports, begin to grow leaders early in order to allow those attributes to really mature over time and not be a forced thing, But then I was talking to somebody else and they were like, Steve, whose parents are going to let you near their 14-year-old kids?
I mean, I'm pretty sure you still have a solid memorandum saying not within 500 feet of a school. Right? Like, I think you're still at that piece.
I have way driving by schools. Yeah.
Hey, but it is real quick. If I could say, I mean, it is something that you realize. And one of the things why I gravitated towards this project is leadership exists in everything. I mean, it does, from, like you said, from school sports as a kid that it's everything we do. Leadership is progress, or it affects progress in everything, every walk of life, every job, everything that has to be done, leadership is involved. And so the ability to affect that, or to make it more efficient, or to have better leaders, I mean, it affects every aspect of our life. I think that's why it's so important. And again, why it really resonated with me.
Yeah, leadership is that intangible thing that you can't get away from. You try to, streamline stuff and say, oh, we don't need that. We're going to focus on this, without really focusing on those aspects of leadership, with engagement, with being self-aware, with having awareness of those around you, and knowing what makes others, tick, and what really drives engagement and builds momentum. You're not going to get anywhere. And so that was the problem that I experienced. And so, I continued to go through the thought process. How can I do something? And finally, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do anything, I certainly can't do it on my own, because this is, as I think about it, this is going to require an organization of some sort for me to be able to really reach out. And, it's going to be time intensive. So, hey, let me reach out to, one of my best friends, Rob McQueen, and see, what are his thoughts? First of all, I need a sounding board. Does this sound crazy? And it might have been you that told me not to go after, trying to mentor, kids, because hey, that'll be a passion project. But where can
you cannot say mentoring kids is a passion project. That you can't say that. That goes down the wrong line.
But yeah, so then, I brought it up to you as a sounding board, and you're like, yeah, I think you got something here. I put together a little presentation for you, had you read it over, this is the problem, like, hey, there's a deficit of leadership across industry.
Yep.
How can we have an effect on that? How can we prevent what has happened in my career in terms of experiencing these bad leaders, and try to have an effect in generating a generation of competent, great leaders. And so that's where it really started to foment. And, and then later on, I'll let you take it from here. You're like, hey, let's bring in Chris. You remember Chris? I was like, yeah. So.
No, it was because when you first called, I was like, I love the concept. And I think your initial thought had been, let's go do business consulting. And I was like, that is not the life I want to live. Like I've learned, like I've been blessed in the aspect of like, I had a great career in the military where I didn't do a day of staff work, which I think is unique for an officer. And then on the backside of it, it was really easy. Like I got to go do really cool things all around the world. And so when it came down to the thought process of doing that business consulting life, I literally would rather go just run my face into a wall.
Yeah, but that's job.
Yeah, it's terrible. So I kind of looked at it and I did what I think I always do when I hear an idea and I'm like, oh, it's good. I'm like, I think I could be a part of that. I call Chris and I go, Chris, am I crazy? So we kind of run in this circle of like, you hit me, hey, am I crazy? And I go, I don't think you're crazy. Maybe we changed it a little bit. I can be on board with that. Maybe I'm crazy. Hey, Chris, am I crazy? And Chris goes, no, that sounds good. And then the cycle went back and we went down to like, hey, what do we create out of this? Like, what does this look like?
Yeah.
And we dig into everything and we go back and do our experiences from the different selections and processes we've been through and military experiences and really built out just a rad program. I mean, and I'm still amazed at how fast this developed. I mean, we just incorporated in August of 2021.
Yeah, incredible momentum.
Yeah, I mean, we started talking about this in June?
No, it was earlier than that because
February.
I remember it was like February.
February 2021.
My bad day at work was like end of January sometime.
Yeah. So we started talking about it in February, and we went 0 to 100 to running our first pilot in October. I don't know, Chris, what did you think when I called you on this? Because
it makes sense. And to some of the other points too is, talking about, I mean, like coaches or, that's where a lot of at a young age, that's where you learn some leadership is youth sports, coaching, all that kind of stuff. But what you guys are talking about and some of the difference is we're interacting with people who are already at the precipice of being leaders or already leading people, but also the maturity difference too, which is a little bit like we have a very focused curriculum. We're able to push people a little bit farther. And then coming from our backgrounds with, the military training, military selections, some of the toughest training that there is, on the planet. And so we have the opportunity to expose senior, mature, prepared people to curriculum that's really challenging and something a little bit out of their comfort zone. So even what we've done so far, I've really seen a lot of growth, or you can see it resonate with the people.
Yeah.
And it just makes you want to get out there and do it more with more people from the feedback that we've gotten from it, I should say. I mean, it's been pretty amazing and definitely makes me feel like we're doing something that is worthwhile and that's needed.
Yeah, and like the way that we've been developing this and the machinations over that time, and developing the concept, we've talked about how did we go about engaging the various people that we would want to bring on as candidates or people that we want to train or be involved with. And at a younger age, people have immature attributes. They need to grow them, refine them, and then that becomes who they are. And then they collect skills along the way. And then on the other hand, you've got people who are the more experienced, but being somebody who's driven to succeed or driven to always learn and evolve. Maybe those attributes are mature, but perhaps we could add some skills that they could wield in addition to that, to help further refine and then also to expand capacity, capability, whatever, and take them to that next level. So, and that's where we've kind of ran with that in terms of curriculum building.
Well, I think on top of that too, Steve, I think this is an important part is to what you both said on organized sports. All of us played organized sports and playing, and specifically on a team sport. And I think that's where you learn to be a team player at a young age. And that's where you learn to be a leader. Right. And that is, I think, a critical aspect of adolescence and growing up and maturing. But when you really look at that from a different level too, is what's unique about what I think what we've built is that we're kind of creating that catalyst, that shock moment, where if you didn't have that experience in the past to build off of, you didn't have those developed skills and attributes, and they're still sitting in kind of a nascent form, and all you've had is a small piece of leadership development, or even just your own training in whatever your job is. And I think this experience creates a level of experience that is a shock to the system, creates the pressure that you need, that all of us have experienced in waves throughout the military. I mean, that is the best thing. Stress inoculation creates, I mean, it's kind of like hardening a diamond, right? Like you have to provide that stress. But I think what we've created is that good balance where you can make, if you didn't have that experience of years playing on, like for me, a hockey team and learning how to do it over time, we've created something where you can replicate a lot of that like experience and a knowledge base in a short period of time in a very intense situation. And I think that, to me, that's what I really love out of this. And the people that we had in our pilot are all talented individuals. And I cannot say thank you enough for them putting their time in to come out and let us run them through our test phase. Like, hey, just come to Texas. Trust me, it's going to be okay. And they all came out, they all put out, and they put a ton of effort into this thing and they crushed it. But the feedback from very competent, very talented individuals. I mean, we had vice presidents in global 500s. We had founders of nonprofits. We had, makeup artists and mothers, and we had a wide swath, firefighters, first responders, this incredible mix of people that came out and supported us to go through this process. And the feedback from people from them who were established in their own right was kind of blew me away and showed that we do have the ability to shape somebody and provide that stress in a short period of time that can kind of make up for what I don't think we're getting a lot of these days. And I even remember going through the Q course and Steve, I know you had the same thing. Chris, you went through it just a little bit before us. But when you had that piece of the guys coming through, even the ones that played sports, if you remember the hip pain thing, where it's like your hip hurts, you're on crutches because, the bone density wasn't even there. Just the shift in these next generations from a physiological standpoint and now to a resiliency and mental strength or standpoint is drastically different than what we grew up underneath. And so I think that type of catalyst and providing that stress is really important for leadership going forward.
What it is it provides the opportunity.
Yep.
Because what they say is the world equally distributes talent, but it does not equally distribute opportunity.
Yeah.
There are amazing, for every world-class athlete that's out there, there are other people who could perform just as well. They just never had, like you're saying, not everybody played youth sports, or not everybody had opportunities to find some of their true skill sets. And leadership, like anything else, although there are people who are maybe born more talented or more personable with that, it's a developed skill set. And some people never get that opportunity to find out what good leaders they are or they can be. And so this is kind of that opportunity where they get to find out a little bit more about themselves. And we've definitely seen it with even just the class that we came through.
Yeah, so like what we're able to do, we are able to provide that opportunity. And in two ways, we can provide that if that team sport sort of aspect is missing in their experience, this could be that for them as well to build upon. And then also too, people wind up jumping headfirst into their jobs and then they just do it. They get their theoretical education in college, and then they jump into doing whatever they do. Whereas, like in the military, before you're actually on the job, you go through training and iterations to do those, to be in an environment where you can practice and actually try to do different things and see what works, what doesn't work, and how people react to how you are, to develop that awareness. And that practice is missing in terms of being able to develop in a training environment before actually going live. And so we provide that opportunity, and people are able to grow that way. So, totally agree with you. And then, with Rob's point about the stress inoculation, by being able to iteratively practice in a leadership scenario and be a leader for this scenario and that scenario and do it quickly over a short period of time, 48, 72 hours, what we're able to do is reach that level of stress inoculation to a certain point. And then that brings people to a level of clarity. And then, without the stress, they can think clearly and be more decisive. So that's a key attribute for any leaders, to be able to think clearly and then make a decisive decision, when conducting business.
No, I think it's great. Chris, I think you've got clip of the day for the highlight for this, because I loved that comment right there, where it's like, the world distributes talent evenly, but it doesn't distribute opportunity evenly. And I think that's
not my quote. I'm paraphrasing something that I've heard before, so don't trademark that.
Oh no,
but realistically, it's true. For every professional athlete that's out there, there's a dozen, if not hundreds, who could have been equally as good, if not better. That's just how big the world is that we forget about sometimes. So finding those stressors, those catalysts, those opportunities to really excel is something. And the other thing I was going to say is, we very loosely modeled this on some of the special operations selection programs, et cetera, tailored it to civilian executive, and me as the operations guy and executing that, had intended on being prepared to scale it back a lot more, because again, this is some of the most difficult training that people can go through, and it's designed to be that way. I have to say, I was amazed at the resiliency of the average, I don't want to say average everyday person, but the people who came through.
Yes.
Everyone exceeded our expectations with the ability to endure the stuff that we put them through. So I think it's just something that gets brought out with the people, as they go through the course, but people, when they challenge themselves, will be surprised with how much they can actually handle and endure. They did it. I was prepared to scale that back a lot more than we had to. And that initial cadre that we went through, not knowing what they were going to be subjecting themselves to, and, went through some pretty difficult training and succeeded. Everybody passed and excelled with everything they did. And I think everybody's come back with a lot of favorable commentary about it. A lot of stuff we learned from, but everybody was happy with what they went through, and I think really grew from it as well. So it made me feel good that way. But again, it did surprise me a little bit with how capable every single person was that went through it.
Yeah. Also taken from, Chris's borrowing from elsewhere. There's nothing new under the sun, really. It's just a matter of how you apply it, and so this is how we're applying our things. And so, there was, how many people were from the military? Very few. One was previous military, going through the class.
Former Navy.
Yeah. And, so they were able to, so the idea is that there's never any growth unless you challenge yourself, unless you're outside of your comfort zone. If things are just fine and never challenging, why would you change what you're doing? Why would you ever seek to improve? So we look to put people outside of their comfort zone in order to see the growth and see how they interact with others under stress.
See, what I loved from this pilot too was, outside of the fact that we pulled it off, and we're able to really execute the way we were. I loved what I learned from the interaction, and especially with the group of people that I was assessing and evaluating and working through on the leadership piece. Was there were specific instances, one specifically on the first obstacle. Literally the first thing we did, we're both Brew, which you guys will get to know well in our audience. Brew's one of our definitely cadre with probably one of the biggest personalities. It's amazing. But Brew and I were sitting there, and I think it was Yaz, and there was just a level of EQ and patience and kind of the ability to swallow, egos in special operations can be a hindrance at times. And it's the same thing when you get to senior levels in business and you get to levels in academia. Pretty much anywhere where there's levels of success, in general, right? Ego is a pain in the ass to deal with. And to watch people in this scenario put aside any ego, be patient, drive forward, accomplish success, but in a way that brought everybody together was, I had some great learning points for me to watch, ask questions, see the thought process, apply it to our methodology, but then go back to it and be like, wow, I was really impressed at the way that was handled. And that's something that's going to involve me as I move forward in our role in this and other things that I do. And it's really a rad experience. And I feel like we've kind of cycled into both talking about leadership development, which is kind of the crux of this thing, like where do good leaders come from? But we've also hit that point of like, we've built a cool program that I'm really excited to share with people to come out and do it. And then even as we get more into this program, share our thoughts and kind of the stories and experiences behind it.
Well,
So,
to Steve's point, and kind of a universal life truth is growth comes from stress, right? I mean, in every aspect of life. And I think with the way the world, life, everything is right now, to some extent too, we've lost respect for how difficult like the lives of our ancestors were. And we very rarely challenge ourselves or go outside our comfort zone nowadays. And that's truly where you're going to get the biggest benefit in whatever aspect, whether it's sports or leadership or anything that you're trying to do, is getting outside your comfort zone and challenging yourself. And that's, again, there's very few opportunities I think that people can do in their day-to-day lives equivalent to this, where you can take a few days away, go to our compound for a weekend and have that austere ability to really challenge yourself and push yourself outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, spot on. Steve, anything else from you? I think we'll round this thing out. And this was a good test podcast for us to our first episode to get through it and chat. It was a good conversation. I'm almost out of my millennial IPA, so I'm going to have to go in and have a bourbon with dinner. Steve, yeah, right. Oh yeah. Oh God. Okay. We're gonna have to come out because Chris and I don't have a good call sign, but Steve, I definitely like when we start getting our alumni daggers, like serial number 001. But call sign Fancy, and that's my favorite. You guys heard it in the initial intro. So whenever you go to a small restaurant in the middle of nowhere, potentially in like the Texas, Louisiana low country, asking for a Pellegrino or a sparkling water at a small honky tonk / bar generally is not going to go that well for you. And sometimes you get a really feisty waitress who looks at you and goes, "Where are you coming from, Yankee?" And really creates a more entertaining scenario when everyone looks and goes, "That's your call sign." And so our illustrious senior partner here, or principal, definitely call sign Fancy. And so you guys are going to see a lot from Fancy coming on, and we're never going to let him live that down. So thank you for yeah, I love it. I don't have a good call sign, man. I mean, my call sign in Afghanistan was Mac because my last name is McQueen. I don't have anything good. Like Perry's or regulars, like that's rad. Like Perry's or regulars.
For those of you who aren't, familiar with the military, the idea of the call sign is, one that you typically don't make for yourself. It's like a nickname, So I definitely didn't pick Fancy for myself, but I own it. It fits. It fits, you bougie bastard.
So. It's perfect. I don't know. I love this. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to us ramble back and forth. It will get better, I promise. And if you get a chance to check us out on sinepari.com, check out our socials, and then like and subscribe to this podcast. We'll be putting out new shows every week. And then every month you're going to get a good detailed look with an interesting perspective from somebody who's really lived it. And I think that's a good piece we're going to bring together here. So thank you so much. I think that rounds out episode 1, unless there's anything else from you two guys.
Nope. Cheers.
No, cheers. Everyone have a good drink. Enjoy your day or evening or whenever the hell you listen to this. All right. Thanks. Fancy out. Wait, no, that's you. Steve, you got to say that.
Yeah, don't steal my shit. Fancy out.
You can't out Fancy. Fancy is out.
You can't out Fancy. All right. Take care.